brothers and my sisters, as we embrace this urgency of creating the beloved community, now is the time to be loved. Love means understanding, redemptive goodwill toward all, which seeks nothing in return. So be loved by implementing the demands of justice to eliminate the school to prison pipeline that has so many black children entrapped. Be loved by correcting voting policies that seek to suppress the votes of millions of black and brown people. Be loved and implement the demands of justice by transforming a society that is disproportionately violent toward black lives, including black transgendered lives and indigenous lives. Be loved and correct false narratives and economic policies that continue to divide and pit poor and working class black and white people against each other. Be loved and implement demands of justice where systems and structures are deconstructed and lead the way of living in community that reimagines just, humane, equitable, and sustainable policies, practices, and behaviors. Love your enemies. Bless them that curse you. Do good to them who hate you, and pray for them that despitefully use you and abuse you. Be loved and do justice and love mercy and walk humbly with our God.
Beloved Community Talks.
Hello, I'm Byron Allen, and welcome to Beloved Community Talks, a special town hall empowering the voter and protecting the rights. This is a very important town hall, and I want you to call everybody you know, and I do mean everybody. Call them, text them, reach out to the world and tell them to join you and to watch this and to lean in, because no one is going to be able to save us except ourselves. We have to all lean in. We can't do this alone. Others can't do it alone. We have to come together, because this is really something that is holding us down, holding us back, and tearing us apart. And they do it right in front of us, and it's systematic. So we're going to talk to some really smart folks, and I couldn't be happier to be here right now, because this conversation is far too important. So let's get going on it. Listen, just before President Johnson signed the voting rights bill, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. penned an article that appeared in the Sunday New York Times titled "Civil Right Number One: The Right to Vote." Civil right number one: the right to vote. In that article, Dr. King, he wrote that voting is the foundation stone for political action. He said that political action allows Black Americans to acquire decent housing, public safety, jobs, and a decent education. And I'll add to that, economic inclusion, the fourth and final chapter. Hindsight allows us to share Dr. King's strategy. He was able to consider how the political system responds versus how the people respond. That's how we're gonna frame today's conversation. First, we're gonna talk to my friend, CEO of the King Center, to help us lay the foundation of this conversation as she explores her father's legacy of working to ensure voting rights. Then we're gonna talk to lawyers and policymakers about the political system that clearly is being bent towards injustice. And finally, we're going to have a conversation full of hope. We're going to talk to activists and organizers on what we can do to change it, to protect our rights, and to achieve the greater good for all Americans, especially Black America, the furthest left behind. This is an extraordinary period in our history. And I've been considering the differences between voter suppression when I was 4 years old in 1965 and today when I'm 60 years old. And unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, not a lot has changed. Let's look at voter suppression on the eve of the 1965 Voting Rights Bill. Civil right number one, the right to vote. What was happening? Violence and death for the mere attempt to try to register to vote, just to try and register. Why? You know why? Because Black America, please, if you don't remember anything from all of this evening, remember this. You are the most powerful vote in America. Why are you the most powerful vote in America? Usually the white vote is split 50-50. So what does that mean? We are the deciding vote. We're the tiebreaker. That's why there are people out there who work very hard to make sure we don't show up with our unbelievable political power and vote. That's why people work so hard to shut you down and shut you out, because you are so powerful. You are the deciding vote. This is why people work so hard to make sure you don't exercise your enormous power. But we're going to stop them. Now, if you look at today, here we are in 2021, Americans do not have voting rights. We don't have them. People are working around the clock. Look at the other scenario in 65. Abuse of local and state laws to impede voting rights. Abuse. Sound familiar? That was 1965. Ladies and gentlemen, it's 2021. We have the same scenario. Look at 1965. Number 3, complex registration procedures. Sound familiar? Here we go. Where's your ID? Where'd you go for breakfast? Why are you wearing those shoes? It's insane. And the only one they haven't brought in 21 that they had in 65, literacy test. Outside of that, they're on track. 56 years later, nothing's changed. Well, we're going to change it, because the one thing I know, when we come together and we focus as a community, there's nothing that can stop us. There's nothing that can keep us down. There's nothing that can keep us out. We have to come together and strategize and move forward as one, so we can achieve one America. So I'm going to bring in my good friend, Dr. Bernice King, and she's a global thought leader, orator, peace advocate, chief executive officer of the Martin Luther King Center for Nonviolent Social Change. And it's an amazing place if you've never, visited and gone, and just the everything, the archives. Now, this was founded by her mother, who I call the true queen of America, Coretta Scott King. And she founded in 1968. She was appointed CEO of the King Center in January of 2012 by the Board of Trustees. And from this position, the same one once held by her mother, this transformative leader steadfastly continues her efforts to advocate for, to advance her parents' legacy for the Kingdom Nonviolence, which Dr. King rebranded Nonviolence 365. So please welcome Dr. Bernice King. Good to see you, Doctor.
Good to see you, Byron. Glad to have you hosting us tonight and to engage in this very critical discussion.
Yeah, very much so. Your mother, I was very, friendly with your mom, and you know how much I love your mother, and I learned so much from her. And she said to me once, and it just changed my perspective. She said, Byron, as Black people in America, we've had 4 major changes, 4 major obstacles, and 4 major things we needed to achieve. And she said, number 1, we needed to end slavery, number 1. And then she said, number 2, we needed to end Jim Crow, which I think was, that was full on genocide. And then she said, and number 3, we needed to achieve civil rights. And then she choked up and she said, number 4, the real reason they killed my Martin, we needed to achieve economic inclusion. And she said, Byron, they didn't take away my Martin because of the speech, I Have a Dream. They took away my Martin because of the speech he gave in February of '68 at Stanford University, The Other America. where he said there are two Americas, and one America has opportunity and access to an education and economic inclusion, and the other America doesn't. And two Americas will not survive. We must achieve one America. And that changed my life and my perspective from that moment on. And that's what I've always been about, working to achieve one America, one America. And I'm about, what your mother taught me, those 4 E's, and your father, those 4 E's for me. Make sure every American has access to a great education. Every American has equal justice. Every American has, environmental protection, and every American has economic inclusion. We have to achieve those 4 E's, and we have to achieve one America. And we can't get there when we have folks out there, suppressing our vote. And so let's talk about that. You talked to Vice President Harris about this issue. How did that go?
The conversation, I think, went well. The question becomes, what is she going to do with all that we talked about? One of the things that I said to her, which I earnestly believe, is that she's in that position kind of like an Esther in the Bible. Esther was put on assignment to save her people. And people doesn't always mean racially. It's in disenfranchised people who are under threat by the systems. And so I told her, you've been chosen, and we're depending on you. Both she and President Biden were members of the Senate. They know those senators, because where we are now, the pressure is going to have to be applied to the Senate. Congress has already passed both the For the People Act and just I think this past Tuesday, the John Lewis Voter Advancement Act. So now all eyes, all attention, all pressure, all focus has to be on the Senate. And so we have got to find a strategic way to continue to put the pressure on the administration to work behind the scenes to do what they need to do, to identify and those senators that we need to move past the filibuster. It's a sticky situation. People, it's like, do we get rid of the filibuster? Do we keep the filibuster? Because going forward, we may need the filibuster for the right reasons. It's supposed to be used for just means, but it's always been used. It was created and used for unjust means always. And so my feeling is, if I might personally say, this, as you said, those 3 E's cannot happen if people do not have the freedom to participate in government, if their vote is disenfranchised, if we are making it harder and more difficult for people to vote. One of the things that I will say is that it just a slight bit of tweak to what you said. Yes, things are similar today, but one of the drastic differences is we have more Black people, brown people registered to vote than ever in the history of our country. We saw that in this past election when people showed up in enormous numbers. And there was just an article in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, the AJC, and I want to do a little bit more research. Some of the ones coming on afterwards can either verify this or not, but it said that 95% of Georgians, which includes about 35% or so of Black Georgians, 95% are registered to vote. If that is the case, you see why now, after all of the efforts of Black Voters Matters, Stacey Abrams and her organization, and so many other grassroots efforts to get more people registered to vote and then voting, we can see why there's such a pushback. But the biggest irony is that the same message, we want to make it easy to vote and hard to cheat, and yet they're making it hard to vote.
And
they're making it hard to vote.
And easy to cheat for them.
Exactly. Exactly. So where we are, frankly, I mean, my brother from the Brennan Center for Justice will speak to this, and I'm sure Cheryl and Eiffel, all of that, what they're doing on the legal front is critically important, and there's nothing we can do there but pray and hope that those justices are able to take the rule of law and really come down on the side of what is just and right. But the biggest part that we have to play, like I said, is, we've got to apply as much pressure and find alternative civil disobedience means. I mean, I know there's been groups who've shut down temporarily access to the airport in DC. My father said in 1968 that we're going to have to look at these levels of disruption, civil disobedience, disrupting the day-to-day business of America when we're dealing with issues so critically important. This is about our democracy. We got to save our democracy. If we can't vote, we can't get to economic inclusion. If all people can't have easy access, we can't get to economic inclusion. We can't get to, equal education. We can't get to environmental justice, and we can't get to economic inclusion. And I forgot the other one you mentioned. There were four of them: education. What was the second one? Environmental, economic.
Equal justice and economic. Yes.
Equal justice. Exactly.
Yeah.
So, if my father was here, just as I spoke to Vice President Kamala, he would be meeting with them. And so we need activism and we need work behind the doors. Uncle Andy, who's Ambassador Andrew Young, was with us last night. And we did something around my father's I Have a Dream speech. And he said, we must continue to work quietly. Doesn't mean we don't still have activism, but we got to complement it with behind the door. I think that's what he meant, not quietly in the sense that, we're not doing anything or saying anything, but we got to work behind the scenes, and we have to work in a way that's sustained over a period of time. The power of my father's movement is that they had sustained action. Think about Montgomery. 300, I argue 382 days if you really count December the 5th. 382 days.
Off the bus. Black people invented ride sharing in that year. We invented ride sharing. 380 days. We invented it and said,
we were the first Uber. That's right.
Uber Jackson, I think was his name. Uber Jackson.
Yes. So, our back's against the wall, no doubt. What happened in Texas today after, the courage and the bravery of those state legislatures who left to kind of, do their civil disobedience, but yet, eventually coming back and seeing that legislation pass means that, our back's against the wall. I don't even think we've been at a place where we didn't have some kind of opening somewhere. I mean, it's very complicated right now. And when you have two Democrats who are, holding up this filibuster issue, they refuse to get on board. Our back's against the wall, but I'm going to share this in closing. I've been sharing it lately. My mother used to always say to me, baby, the darkest hour is before the dawn. I just didn't get to ask her, when do you know it's the darkest? Because every time it just seems like, Lord, can it get any worse? But the beauty is that daybreak will come if we continue to apply the pressure where it needs to be applied towards justice, because the universe is on the side of justice. We know that. As Daddy said, the moral arc is long and it bends towards justice. So we can't let up. We can't give up. Some people may have to take a momentary break, but collectively, we have to make sure that we're on top of this day to day. And we have to come up with a strategy to identify those vulnerable members of the Senate that really can be appealed to.
Listen, here's the good news. We have the power.
Yes.
They need our money and they need our votes. Exactly. Because they don't exist without our money and without our votes. And don't ever forget it and live by that. See, the thing we have to do, and I've always said this about Black America, we have to get a calculator, know the numbers, and hold the system accountable. Know your value, know your worth. When we show up, you win. When we don't show up, you lose. That's why you're trying to suppress us. Black America, step up to your power because you are running things. They have worked really hard to make sure you know, or believe you don't, believe you're not running things, but no, you are. You know,
Can I add this? Can I add this last point? Because I know we got to wrap.
do it.
The coalition of conscience is what happened at the March on Washington. That when it wasn't just Black people there today. It was 75% Black, I think, and about 25% white and other.
Right.
And there were people from all segments of society, organized labor, what today we call civic organizations. Hollywood was there. The faith community was there. Everybody was there. So we have to continue to build broad coalitions. And I dare say we have to begin to penetrate in many of these rural areas and even in those areas that we call Republican control.
Yes.
They need to see that this is a threat to our democracy, that it's not even just a Black issue, it's a democracy issue.
Yes.
Because the same thing that threatens us today, we know that whole saying, they came for this group and then they came for this group and they came for this group. And in the end, they came for us and nobody was left because nobody stood up for anybody else. So we're in this together and we have to help them to see this is not about Democrat. This is not about Republican. This is about what's right and making sure that all of us have fair and equal access to the ballot.
That's exactly right. And, I've always said this is about America. This is about America. And America is a small tribe. We're only 330 million people, approaching 9 billion, 8 billion, right? So there are people out there that see a world where we don't exist. And we have to make sure that every American is positioned to succeed. If you're not educated, if you're not engaged, you're a liability. And America can no longer afford liabilities because our competition is too fierce. We have to make sure every American is an asset, fully engaged, educated, a part of our system and contributing to our system. We can't have an industry of incarcerating. We have to create an industry of educating and engaging. America, you have to make sure everybody is positioned to bring their A game. And we will fall apart, as your father taught us. Two Americas will not survive. That's the right. Two Americas. That's where you will implode. And what I've said to white America is that you have the most to lose. Because if you look around, you own 99.9% of everything. And when it implodes, you're the one who has the most to lose. You are better off engaging and making sure everybody becomes an asset. And last but not least on that point, this country is too great to have a scenario where, God forbid, we got the wrong verdict on that Derek Chauvin verdict out of Minnesota.
I know.
Okay, this country would still be in ashes. And
it would be.
Okay, this would have been a bad scenario. So you can't let things be that fragile. You have to bring balance, and that's that equal justice. And you have to make sure everybody's educated. You have to make sure everybody has environmental protection and everybody has economic inclusion. You got to bring balance to the system. And this is important to our democracy. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you so much. And we have to continue to non-violently engage so we don't get to that place.
No, we have
just talked about.
Violence is not an option. It's not an option. Intellectual capital is what we have. We have an abundance of it. We just have to apply ourselves. When Stacey Abrams was running for governor of Georgia, I called her up and I said, look, I'm in LA, but there are a lot of people who I think will appreciate what you're trying to accomplish. Please come out here to LA and let me do a fundraiser for you. I ended up doing her second biggest fundraiser. And unfortunately, she lost. And I called her up and I said, tell me the numbers, because I'm very numerical. And I said, how much did you lose by? And she said, less than 2%. And I said, so tell me, how much money, how much more did we need to raise to achieve the first Black female governor in America? How much money was that? She said, if we had raised another $10 million, I could have won. So I'm sitting here and I'm going, come on now, we have that. That's easy.
The economics.
We have to lean at like $5, $10. When we have unbelievable political talent, not just Black, but there's talent out there, white, Asian, Hispanic, gay, everything that is carrying out our agenda, we have to lean in and we have to support them. And we can't just vote. Voting isn't enough. We have to vote and donate, but donate to the people carrying out the agenda to achieve one America. But after we vote and we donate, we have to hold them accountable. Vice President Harris, no excuses. There isn't a bank in the world where we can deposit excuses. So we don't accept. We don't accept. I tell all my employees, I got about 2,000 employees, when you get off the elevator on my floor, there's a sign that says, I do not accept excuses because there isn't a bank in the world in which I can deposit excuses. You get it done. So Vice President Harris, President Biden, I don't want to hear about this. Get it done. No excuses. And when you get it done, we will be there with our money and our votes. Because now that we've delivered our money and our votes, Black people, we got to change it to that third step. Hold them accountable. What you going to do for us?
Exactly.
You got to master. And, that's what I was very critical. And I just said, Black people, what's our ask of President Obama? President Obama, what's our ask? We have to be clear. And we have to be very loud and proud with all of them. Congress, Senate, all of them. And by the way, here's the good news. If you don't carry out our agenda, our votes and our money can go elsewhere like that. And that's what they will respond to. So thank you so much. I'm going to bring up. No, don't you go anywhere. We're going to keep hanging out. We got some terrific folks here. We got Congresswoman Naacp Williams. Naacp, are you there? Is she there? All right, well, I'm gonna go ahead and continue to introduce her. She has been a fierce advocate for social justice, women and families throughout her political and professional career. As a member of Congress, Congresswoman Williams continues to uplift the legacy of her mentor and predecessor, Congressman John Lewis, by fighting to prevent voter suppression and expand free and fair access to the ballot box. Do we have Congresswoman Williams?
I'm here, Byron, and I'm ready to have this conversation tonight.
All right. Well, thank you and welcome. Anything you want to share about yourself with the good folks out here?
So I've been in Congress for 8 months now, and Byron, everything that we have done in my short 8 months has been paramount to everything that we've been fighting for as a people since we've been in this country. I keep looking at, it's 2021 and I am here in the seat that was once held by Congressman John Lewis, and yet here I am fighting to restore the right to vote in this country. So it shows me how much things change. Some things stay the same. They might change the tactics, but they are seeking the same results. And so that's why I'm glad that I have a community and a village with me in this process, because it really takes all of us. I was listening to Dr. King as she talked about her conversation with Ambassador Young last night, who also held this seat in Congress that I'm in. And he was talking about we need some people working quietly. And he's talking about that inside and outside game. I came to Congress as an activist and advocate coming from the state Senate. And now we're working both angles. And so I am working with my sisters in the movement who've been raising their voices in DC, and then having those conversations with leadership, because we got to get this done. There's too much at stake.
You got that right. Thank you for joining us. And I am so proud of you. And it put a big smile on my face when I saw you win. And
thank you.
Georgia's in my heart. I own the Weather Channel there, and we have about 400 employees, so I keep a close eye on Georgia. So thank you for being a part of that leadership. Also, we have Michael Lee. He serves as senior counsel for the Brennan Center's Democracy Program, and this guy is brilliant, and he's a hard worker. He's very committed, and he focuses on voting rights and elections. And prior to joining the Brenner Center, Lee practiced law at Baker Botts LLP in Dallas for 10 years. And he's the author of a widely cited blog on redistricting and election law issues. And the New York Times called him indispensable. Michael Lee, tell the good folks about yourself out there, and welcome.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me here. I'm glad to be here, and thank you for that very effusive introduction. I have to say, I feel like there was a little bit of a bait and switch with this panel, because I agreed to do it. Like, the King Center reached out and said, "Can you talk about redistricting?" And I said, "I'm happy to do that." But then it turns out that they didn't tell me that I was going to be on a panel with like Cheryl and Eiffel and Congresswoman Williams. I was like, oh my God.
You deserve to be here. Are you kidding me? You deserve to be here.
Well, it was
Come
like,
on now.
no, these are like some, like Cheryl Lynn in particular is like legendary, right? I mean, she is like a, she's
a true queen.
She's a true queen. Yeah. So I come from the Brennan Center for Justice at NYU School of Law. We're a think tank attached to the law school, and we work on a whole range of democracy issues: voting rights, fair courts, criminal justice reform. But where I work is in the redistricting and the census area. So I'm glad to be here to talk about redistricting and also voting rights. So,
thank you. Well, we really appreciate your intellect on this, and we love having you here. So thank you for joining us. So now let me talk about another brilliant person and a true queen, Cheryl Eiffel. She's the president and the director counsel of the NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund, the nation's premier civil rights law organization fighting for racial justice and equality. LDF was founded in 1940 by the legendary civil rights lawyer and later a Supreme Court Justice, Thurgood Marshall. She began her career as a fellow of the American Civil Liberties Union before joining the staff of the LDF as an assistant counsel in 1988, where she litigated voting rights cases for 5 years. Now, you have to pick up her book. Her book, On the Courthouse Lawn, Confronting the Legacy of Lynching in the 21st Century. Everybody needs to own that book. Was highly acclaimed and is credited with laying the foundation for contemporary conversations about lynching and reconciliation. This year, she was appointed to President Biden's commission on the Supreme Court. Welcome, Cheryl Eiffel.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Oh, well, it's great to have you. Anything you want to share about yourself that I may not have covered in your intro?
No, not at all. I'm just delighted that we're having this conversation. And Mr. Allen, at the top of the conversation, you talked about our power in this moment. And I'm really glad you phrased it that way, because I think sometimes we talk about this moment from a position of weakness, and I can understand it. We are facing tremendous obstacles in the Supreme Court, obstacles in the failure of Congress to move forward with voting legislation, holding on to a Senate rule, a Jim Crow relic, the filibuster, and elevating that over the constitutional rights of Black and Brown people to participate equally in the political process. State legislatures that are passing racially discriminatory voting laws. We're facing a lot, but we're also in a moment where we are as conscious as we have been in decades. We are as committed. We have demonstrated our ability to mobilize and to show up. We have clarity about what white supremacy really is and its ongoing power in our political system and in our legal system. And when we are conscious, when we've linked arms with our allies, and when we're clear about the obstacles that are before us, I think we have power. And actually, I think the laws we're seeing being passed in the states, Texas just last night, and Georgia and Florida, and LDF has already sued Georgia. And we're those laws are in response to the kind of mobilization that Black voters demonstrated last year. They are in response to our ability during a global pandemic to demonstrate our power. They are in response to the litigation that so many of my civil rights litigating colleagues were able to file last year. So they are on the run. We are not on the run, and we should remember that and walk into this moment trying to figure out how we can continue to leverage the power that we have to push through this moment and get what we need in order to ensure that we protect our full citizenship in this country.
Absolutely. And that is the most important thing. You must remember, you have the power. And if you didn't have the power, they wouldn't be trying to suppress you. You're running things. That's the realization they never want you to achieve. I like to, Congressman Williams, I like to talk about, they passed the John Williams Voting Rights Advancement Act. What do you think about that? What does that mean? What do we need to do next? How do we get past this filibuster? Tell us what we need to do, because the most important thing that I really want everybody here to pick up on, CTA, That's all that matters right now. CTA, call to action. We just can't talk about the woos. Oh, me, poor me, poor me. What are we going to do? What can we do? How can we help? Who do we email? Who do we call? Because one of the things we have that's really also powerful, we're connected because of social media. We can talk to 20 million people in 30 seconds. So share with us, about this John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act and where we are and what we need to do to make sure it gets pushed all the way through.
So first, Byron, I think it's like when you listen to Cheryl and Eiffel and you follow her, and she's kind of summed up everything from the beginning to what happened in Congress to where we need to go next. It's kind of unfair for me to follow her as someone that I've followed her career. So I'm grateful to be here this evening to continue this conversation that we started in the House when I first got sworn in January. We knew what was at stake. And then here in Georgia, what they would have you to believe is that it's about one state, or in Texas, that it's just about Texas, but it's about the entire country. It's about standardizing democracy in this country. And so on Tuesday, when I stood on the floor of the House of Representatives, and before we passed the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, one of the things that I told my colleagues was, if you ever wondered what you would be doing during the civil rights movement, this is your opportunity to find out. So don't look back and say, well, you would have voted this way or you would have done this, because now you have an opportunity to step up. And as Congressman Lewis would say, find a way to get in the way. This is our civil rights moment. Everything is on the line. Our democracy is on the line. We've talked about how voting impacts every issue that you care about. If you care about affordable housing, then we need to get HR 1 and HR 4 passed in the United States Senate. If you care about the racial wealth gap, then we need to get HR 1 and HR 4 passed in the United States Senate. And how are we going to do that? We're going to do that, just as Ambassador Young said, it's still going to take that inside and outside game. I have not given up. I am still having these conversations. We didn't even think that we were going to get the HR 4, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, passed until September, but we just got it done on Tuesday because Congress was called back because it was so important. So the House came back, we did our part, and now it sits in the Senate. Well, the Senate is telling us they won't be back into a certain date and they have to go through their hearings. But that was the same conversation in July about the House. But people put on the pressure and showed up in DC and didn't go away and didn't let up and continued to have those conversations. And then members of the Legislative Black Caucus, we had like the Congressional Black Caucus, Chairwoman Beatty was speaking with leadership about how we can't wait until September. There's not an option to wait. And we have to get this done now. So we're going to continue the outside and inside pressure, and we're going to continue to put the pressure on. I remember Congressman Lewis saying that in the movement, they always said they had to dramatize the moment. We got to continue to dramatize the moment to bring attention to it. We can't let people think that just because Texas passed their bill last night that we're done. We're not done. We just still have more work to do. And so I have not given up, and I'm going to keep pushing. And I know that I have a village behind me fighting every step of the way.
Well, all right. That's great. That's amazing. But we know you can't do it by yourself, and the village can't be behind you. We got to be next to you, if not in front of you. So hit us with the CTA. What is the call to action? What can we do?
I've been telling people to continue to call Chuck Schumer. He is in charge of when these bills come up on the floor of the United States Senate. He can decide when the Senate is going to move forward with their process, and he can decide the rules around this antiquated filibuster. He can decide how we're going to move forward in this. And my Georgians that are listening in tonight, when we talk about our power, we know the power that Georgia has. He would not be Leader Schumer had it not been for the voters who showed up in Georgia. He would not be in the majority. And so we have to make sure that we're continuing. So we know that our 2 U.S. senators here in Georgia are going to be on the right side of history in this, but we got to make sure that the entire Democratic caucus is on the right side, even if we can't bring Republicans along with us. But even though this is not a partisan issue, it is about our democracy. And I want everybody to have free and fair access to the ballot, regardless of what party you're voting for, because I know that when we put the issues on the table, that more people are going to show up to vote for those issues that are right, fair, and just. So call the Senate, call Leader Schumer, and we need to bring HR 1 and HR 4 up for a vote.
Anything else we can do?
We got to continue to dramatize the moment. Our activists, our friends that you're going to hear from later in the segment that are in DC right now. Tomorrow, I'm going to be down at the King Center with Dr. Bernice King, and we're going to kick off the march to recognize the anniversary of the March on Washington so that we can continue to bring people into the conversation. There are still some people that are not paying attention. So we got to continue to dramatize the moment. Show up for the rallies that are in your cities across the country tomorrow. There's an anchor event right here in Atlanta. There's one in DC, but other cities across the country are having marches and rallies tomorrow as well.
Congresswoman Williams, thank you so much. We're going to continue this conversation with you, but it is really important, your leadership and letting us know and informing us always what we can do. If you have a website that's constantly updating us and informing us and who we need to contact with, phone numbers, emails, I think that helps tremendously. Michael Lee, please share with us all of, or not all of them, some of the horrible tactics that they use to disenfranchise us, to shut us down, to try and keep us out, and basically modern day slaves. Because if you're not voting and you're not a part of the real democracy of America, we're nothing more than modern day slaves getting paid minimum wage, if that. So we're not interested in being modern day slaves. So tell us all of their little trick bags.
Well, there are two lines of attack, and I think it's important to realize that there are two. One is you've seen this record spate of restrictive voter laws around the country, more than 400 so far, and 30 of which have passed in 18 states, doing things like banning you from giving water to people in line, but also, cutting back voting days, requiring additional requirements if you're voting by ID requirements if you're voting by mail, making it easier to purge voters off the rolls. So, they don't take any excuse and kick you off the roll with very flimsy evidence, right? And there, I could go on because there's so many of these, right? I mean, what they're really trying to do is it's death by 1,000 cuts, right? It's not as though they're just saying you can't vote. And this is like what they tried back in the past, like literacy tests. They also had all kinds of other things sort of were going on, white primaries and things like that. And now they're just trying to, take out a few voters here, a few voters there, but it matters, right? When you look at what happened in Georgia in January with the Senate runoffs, right? I mean, it was a close race, and Joe Biden is president of the United States because of 44,000 votes in basically 3 states, right? And including Georgia, and that's it doesn't take a whole lot of voter suppression to have a huge impact on the country, right? And that's something I think people have to understand, because sometimes in the media you hear people push back and say, well, it's it's not millions of people who would be able to vote. It's maybe a few thousand here or there, but that matters, right? And it's also morally offensive to say oh, well, if it's only one person, it doesn't matter. But but the consequences don't have to be that great. And it really is a death by 1,000 cuts. But then there's the flip side of that, right? People are trying to make it harder for you to vote. But then there's gerrymandering, which is the flip side. Even if you run the gauntlet, even if you manage to show up at the ballot box and vote, what they do is they draw the district maps, the state legislative maps, the congressional maps, so that your vote basically doesn't matter. And they draw them so that one party wins a certain number of seats, the other party can't win more than a certain number of seats. And they also discriminate against Black and Latino and Asian communities, for racial reasons. And, this is something that is about to happen. With the data just came out from the Census Bureau a couple of weeks ago, and now states are going to be off to the races in terms of drawing maps. And I think, we're really looking at perhaps some of the most discriminatory maps that the country's ever seen, because the Supreme Court has gutted key protections of the Voting Rights Act. It's also said that partisan gerrymandering is perfectly okay and can't bring claims in federal court. All of that, which will have huge impacts, especially on communities of color in states like Georgia and Texas, because even if you're just drawing maps to discriminate against Democrats, the realities in states like Texas and Georgia, people of color are the key to doing that, right? Because there still aren't that many white Democrats. What Democrats get about 25-28% of the white vote in states like Texas and Georgia. There aren't that many of them. They live really close to white Republicans, so it's sort of hard to gerrymander that much. But because of residential segregation, you can pack together, break apart communities of color in order to move the political dial, and people of color are going to be in the sites, and especially people of color in the suburbs. Most people of color now live in the suburbs, not in the cities, and that is going to and so like Gwinnett County was 9% white in 1990. It's 35% white now. And so those are the places where the battles are going to be, and people are going to try to block out multiracial America for a decade or more.
Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that. It's so important. I think people don't realize that there are a number of members of Congress who won by 10, 20 votes, less than 100 votes. That's how tight it is. That's how close it is. That's why we must always remember the people who died for us to have the right to vote, and how important it is, and how powerful it is, and do everything you can to protect it. Michael, please give us some CTA. What's the call to action? So what is it that we can do to protect ourselves?
Well, I think I echo what the Congresswoman said. I think there's a lot of pressure that is, we're in this window of time where there still is time to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, still time to pass the For the People Act, or some version of the For the People Act, but the Senate really needs to act fast. Right now, the Senate is not scheduled to come back until after September 13th, or on September 13th, and so that's a long time away. The Majority Leader, Chuck Schumer, has said that he might bring the Senate back earlier if they can reach some kind of deal. By all accounts, they're making progress on getting to some kind of deal, but they need to really sort of speed it up. And it is not just, people focus a lot on Senator Manchin and Senator Sinema because they've been sort of the outspoken defenders of the filibuster, but there are a lot of Democrats who sort of are on the line about changing the filibuster. And I think it makes sense to, wherever you are, if you're in California, Dianne Feinstein has said she would be willing to change the filibuster if our democracy were at risk, but she doesn't think our democracy is at risk. And, you hear things like that and you're like, what? Like, how we just literally had an insurrection like 6 months ago or 8 months ago now. And Chris Coons in Delaware, and others are Senator Carper from Delaware also sort of are on the fence about whether they want to change the filibuster. So just telling people that there is a crisis in America that they can solve, and future generations will judge them if they don't, is really important. So don't take anybody for granted. Don't say just because I don't live in West Virginia or Arizona, I don't have a voice. Call even people who you think are on the right side and just say there is a crisis. Time is running out. You can solve it, but you need to put your shoulder to the wheel and do it.
Well, listen, here's the good news. We're on the eve of 2022, and we have the midterm elections coming up. Schumer is up. Pelosi, a lot of folks are up. And this is one thing you can put on your list of call to action. Be loud and be proud and be clear in communicating that this is very important to you, that this is achieved, that there are no excuses to be accepted, and let them know that. And when they do right by you, you should do right by them. And now they've earned your vote. Now they've earned your donation. So we have to live by accountability, but we have to communicate and be clear about our power and what we expect. You must remember, politicians are nothing more than temporary hired help, and they work for you. Be the boss and tell them what to do. Tell them what to do. And if you have to, go for it.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to add one other thing I should have added earlier.
Sure.
Also, people should call the White House, right? The Biden administration, President Biden has said a lot of the right words on this. Vice President Harris has said a lot of the right words on this. We haven't yet really seen them also sort of engage in the way that they have in infrastructure. The president went to Capitol Hill to talk about infrastructure. They had people over to the White House to talk about, infrastructure and other things like that. They haven't had that kind of same sense of urgency on voting rights. And there are some people in the White House who at least are reported to believe that you can, quote unquote, out-organize voter suppression. And that is just not, people, the other panel will talk more about that, but that is not, it's that would be a Herculean effort. And the one thing that you can't do is you can't out-organize gerrymandering, right? Because those districts will be drawn in a way that it doesn't matter. Even if you have a high turnout, it won't matter. And so the Biden White House also needs to be doing more, and people should call the White House and say they need to be doing more.
Yes, thank you for that. That is a CTA. Biden, we put you in the White House. We didn't do that for a photo op. We did that because we don't want to have a conversation about our voting rights. You got to get this right, and you got to get it done right now. That's a great CTA. So yeah, our leaders need to have a meeting with Biden and Harris and everybody else in that administration and say, we don't want to ever talk about this again. And it's shameful that we're talking about it in 2021 and the people who have lost their lives over this. Really? A conversation from 1965 and 2021? Are you kidding me? Come on now. This is completely unacceptable. And if you don't get it right, you're just going to come off like a brain donor, and there's no way you're going to get our votes, and you're not going to get our financial support. Cheryl, please share with us some of your thoughts on call to action and what we can and what we should be doing, because it can't just be brilliant people like you carrying the load by yourself.
Well, first of all, I want to thank Congresswoman Williams and Michael Lee for their CTAs, because they are absolutely spot on point. And I just want to say three things. So I want to underscore what both of them have said about the need to call your senator. Because people do say, oh, I live in New York, or I live in a blue state, or whatever people think. You need to put pressure on your senator so that your senator will put pressure on those senators who believe that this Senate rule is more important than the constitutional rights of Black and Brown people to participate in the political process. So you want to make sure you have in your phone the number 202-224-3121. That's 202-224-3121. When you call that number, you can tell them what state you're in, and they will connect you with your senator, and you can talk to that Senate office. In my view, if you are going to be an active American citizen at this moment, that should be on speed dial in your phone. You should be able to call your senators, your two senators, every week. It doesn't matter whether you think they're on the right side or not. You want to annoy them so that they will annoy Senator Manchin. Senator Manchin is a senator from West Virginia, but he was elected by 290,000 votes. West Virginia is a pretty small state. And that cannot be the deciding votes that determine whether or not we are going to be full citizens in this country. So you have to pressure your senators so that they will pressure him. So that's one. Number two, Michael has talked about gerrymandering and redistricting. This is so important. And what you can do is, first of all, you can learn more by attending the redistricting workshops that LDF has been convening in various states in the South. We've had several already in South Carolina, in Louisiana, and Alabama. We'll continue having it. You can go to our website at www.naacpldf.org. We are a nonpartisan organization, but we believe people in the Black community need to understand the process and have the tools available to them so that they can use their voices, so that they can testify, so that they can show up at meetings, so they can be informed and influence the process. Number three, and this is really important. I know that we are talking about 2022 because those are federal elections. But Mr. Allen, every year there are elections. There were elections this week in Birmingham, Alabama for the mayor and the city council and the school board and the county council. And we need people to understand that every election matters when you are part of a marginalized group. And my mantra has been, and my staff knows this, leave no power on the table. And we as a community have left too much power on the table. We don't vote enough in school board elections. Now we see around the country this so-called anti-CRT effort to try to stop schools from teaching about the history of race in America. School boards matter. We need people to participate in school board elections. We need them to participate in county commission elections. We need them to participate in district attorney elections. We need them to participate in judicial elections. These are the elected offices that have direct control and contact over our lives and our communities. And yet we too often think that elections are either an every 4-year or every 2-year exercise. So the other thing I want people to do is to get in their head that we cannot afford to leave any power on the table. You need to find out what elections are being held in your city, in your state this year. if it's for governor, if it's for mayor, if it's for county commission, if it's for public service commission, if it's for railroad commissioner. You need to educate yourself about that office. You need to decide which of the candidates who are running for that office have your best interests at heart, and you need to vote in that election. You need to show up at candidate forums. You need to shake this thing up. This is supposed to be a democracy, and it's supposed to build from the bottom up. But we have ignored the bottom, and that is where we could have disproportionate power. So I'm going to ask that even as people focus on calling their United States Senator, because we must have the For the People Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, even as they continue to support organizations like LDF and like the Brennan Center and others who are litigating these cases, even as they show up and engage in activism along with these extraordinary organizers like Black Voters Matter and so many others, that you also remember that you have in your hand the vote every year, and that you show up and vote in every election and leave no power on the table.
Thank you, Queen Cheryl and Eiffel. Really do appreciate that. And Congresswoman Williams, who else should we be aware of in the political ecosystem that we should definitely lean in and support? I know Congressman Mondaire Jones is coming up for re-election, and others, and we just want to make sure that we protect this very precious political talent in our community. Even if we don't live in New York, we have to lean in and we have to support people like a Mondaire Jones in New York. Who else should we be thinking about that needs our support as we're going into these midterms?
So Byron, I know you're thinking on the congressional level, but hearing two co-conspirators for justice talk about redistricting and why we all need to lean in and every election mattering. I often say democracy doesn't start and stop on election day because there's so much that happens in between. And thinking about the state legislative races and redistricting, that's where redistricting happens in the states, in the state legislative races. And in Georgia, we have those races every 2 years. Everything is on the ballot next year in Georgia. Members of Congress and every constitutional office, from the governor, the secretary of state, and every state senator and state legislator is on the ballot. And those are the people who this fall will be drawing the district lines all over the country. State legislators are going to be drawing district lines. So find out what the process is in your state. And that's the other call to action, Byron. Get involved on the local level with your state legislature and find out what is happening with your redistricting process.
You know, I want to put something on the table. You know, some folks, are super busy and unfortunately don't have the time to be to get informed, or as much as they would like to be informed. Is there a place for us to go to get leadership, to get guidance on issues and information and how we should look at things, and maybe how kind of guide us as our political advisors on how we should vote and on these issues that are helping our communities or definitely standing against things that are hurting our community?
So there are a lot of good organizations out there, Byron. And if you're looking for something with a little more spice, I've never been short on opinions. And you can follow me at Naacp Williams on Twitter. And I am always sharing my thoughts and views. And I will let you know that I ground my policymaking decision around centering those most marginalized in everything that I do. So if that is your framework of how you think leadership should move forward, I raised in Alabama, grew up here, came to age here in Atlanta, and represent a very historic district, came from the state Senate, and have a background of advocacy and action. And so I would love to bring more people into the fold because we are all in this together. At Naacp Williams.
Yes, absolutely. I think folks should lean in. And what Cheryl said also earlier was brilliant. And we don't know, that's not on our radar. That's not amplified. Those, the boards and the attorney general and so forth and so on. We need that guidance, that leadership. And so in terms of who we should be thinking about and who should be on that radar. So I think
Byron, if I can, if you just go to LDF's website, you'll be able to link to a voting rights microsite. We try to provide that information so when you can register, when the election is, what offices are up in a particular year. it's so important. And I'm glad you asked the question, because so many people don't have access to that information. The League of Women Voters very often has access to that information as well. But you can also demand it of your civic organizations. Tell your church leaders that you want that information. You want them to post it. They can't tell you which candidate to vote for, but they can tell you what offices are up for office. You can reach out to your local NAACP, your local urban league. These are the kinds of things that our civic groups have to be able to provide to us, because we have to be able to have the knowledge to know when to show up. But you can certainly go to LDF's site, and I'm sure other national civil rights organizations, the Lawyers Committee, the NAACP have similar information on their sites. But really make it your business. If November comes around and you're not voting, it should feel weird for you, right? So you should want to know, are there any elections this November? And even if it's for one office, if it's for a constitutional amendment, if it's for a referendum, if it's for a bond issue to decide how much money will go to the public library or the public pools, you need to show up and vote, or you need to vote absentee. This is your voice. This is your tax dollars. This is about our future.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Absolutely brilliant. Once again, please share this with everybody you know and love, even the people you don't even like. This is too important. And we're really talking about our democracy and the quality of our lives, our children, our grandchildren, and our bloodline until the end of time. So there's nothing more important to this than this. I want to now bring up this beloved video. So I'm going to go ahead and cue that, and please share it with the good folks out there, if you would, please.
Love. Now, I know many of you saying, what do you mean by love? Because people have so many different understandings of love. What I am talking about is not the powerless, the weak, and the anemic love. No, no, no. I'm talking about be love and implement the demands of justice. Be love and use your power to correct everything that stands against love. The urgency of now is to dig in and create the beloved community by rising up to be love. Let's go forward in this moment and bridge the divides. Let's go forward to create the beloved community. Let's go forward and rise up to be love.
Thank you, Dr. King. Now I want to bring on three more brilliant American heroes. Helen Butler, she serves as the executive director of the Georgia Coalition of the People's Agenda, a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization comprised of representatives from the human rights, civil rights, environmental, labor, women, young professionals, youth, elected officials, peace and justice groups throughout the state of Georgia and other southeastern states, founded by the late Dr. Joseph E. Lowery, that advocates for voting rights and justice issues. Welcome, Helen. Tell the good folks out there a little bit more about yourself, if you would, please.
Well, good evening, Byron, and thank you so much for having me with the King Center. I'm just happy to be a part of this beloved activity. You've said it all about the People's Agenda. We're here to protect that right to vote, the legacy of Dr. King, C.T. Vivian, John Lewis, you name it, Coretta Scott King, Evelyn Lowery, all of those civil rights giants that really fought to have the right to vote in the 1965 Voting Rights Act. So we're here to protect that right. I worked alongside Dr. Lowery and Reverend James Orange. So I'm grounded and know that it is critically important that we protect that right to vote. And we are really under attack because Jim Crow 2.0 is in full effect, voter suppression, and we've got to be prepared to fight against it. You've heard in the other segment about ways to do it on a federal level, but we've got to do it on a state and local level as well. So we've got to be involved in this fight to ensure that we protect our power and we do not give it away to anyone else.
Amen. Let's say hello to Mary Pat Hector. She's a graduate of Spelman College and a current graduate student at Georgia State University. She began community organizing at the age of 12. Yeah, that's great. At the age of 12. And at the age of 18, she was one of the youngest community leaders to advise President Barack Obama on criminal justice reform in the Oval Office. And by the age of 19, she became the youngest woman and person of color to run for public office in the state of Georgia, losing by only 22 votes. Look at that right there. Now, that's shame on us. Somebody this brilliant, this magnificent should not be losing, period, and certainly should not be losing by 22 votes. We must lean in. And that is unacceptable. Please say hello to Mary Pat Hector. Anything else you would like to share with us on your background? That you're running Rise, currently serves as the program strategist at Rise Inc. But tell us about that organization. Tell us a little bit more about yourself, if you would, please, and congratulations on your success.
Absolutely. I serve as the state director of Rise as well as Black Youth Vote. And honestly, it has been my passion to ensure that young people, whenever they do run for office, I ensure that I work with them to ensure that they don't lose by those 22 votes that I did, right? And that I know that if more young people would have showed up, that 22 wouldn't be a thing. So just ensuring that young people are aware of local elections that are happening within their communities, and that they're not only aware, but they're showing up, and that we're empowering them to be more involved beyond just showing up to the ballot, but becoming poll workers, becoming election protection monitors, by canvassing and being more engaged in the political process.
Brilliant. Thank you. We also have Latasha Brown, who's an award-winning organizer. She's a philanthropic consultant, political strategist, and a jazz singer with over 20 years of experience working in nonprofit and philanthropy and sectors and a wide variety of issues related to political empowerment, social justice, economic development, leadership development, wealth creation, and civil rights. Please welcome Latasha Brown. And Latasha, please tell the good folks about yourself and all the great work you've been doing.
Thank you so much for having me. I am a child of the movement. That I essentially am a native of Selma, Alabama. And in my entire adult life, I've actually wanted to continue and saw my responsibility and my purpose of continuing the legacy that our people started, particularly in the Black Belt of Alabama, and leading this work. So I'm co-founder of Black Voters Matter. I've continued to share in this space, and these sisters that are on here today, these are my colleagues, and these are my sisters in the struggle through Black Women's Roundtable and many, many other efforts. So I'm really honored to be here today.
Well, we are honored to have you here. So let's talk about, the challenge that the many challenges, but one of the big challenges right here on the forefront. Let's talk about this and the attack on our voting rights. And, I understand this is something that unfortunately is continuing. And I just love to get your perspective on it and on it, Mary Pat. What do you think we need to do, especially from that young point of view, to win this and get beyond this challenge?
Absolutely. In the beginning of the conversation, one of the things that I heard Congresswoman Nikema Williams talk about is the fact that a lot of people are unaware of what's taking place. In 2020, during the 2020 presidential election, about 55% of people between the ages of 18 years old and 29 participated in that 2020 election. But does that 55% know what's occurring right now when it comes to voting rights? Absolutely not. I think that there needs to be a sense of urgency. I know Latasha Brown, Ms. Helen Butler, Nikema Williams, we've been in DC several times, like she said, trying to dramatize the moment, but there needs to be more. And I think young people need to understand the sense of urgency. I think it's not as blatant, right, as what we witnessed when you think about police violence and brutality. It's not as blatant. Or it doesn't affect you like the fact that, like student loan debt, right? And the fact that we haven't seen any cancellation regarding student loan debt. So they're not seeing how it impacts them in their day-to-day lives. So they're not aware. But just kind of continuing to try to force this particular issue on them it's been very hard, but it's work that needs to be done. And I'm happy to be able to do that work with women like the ones on this call.
You know, you being, you know, right there in college, which is where a lot of that energy comes from, even in the civil rights movement in the 60s, that young, and when you think about Martin Luther King and how he changed the world, and Coretta Scott King, you know, they changed the world by the time, you know, he was 39 years old. They were in their 20s when they did a lot of their work. And so those college kids have to be really engaged, and they have to understand something that is so key that you touched on, that is simply brilliant. And I've always said this, you know, they kill us in the schoolroom, making sure we don't get a proper education, and they kill us in the courtroom by making sure we don't have equal justice, and they kill us in the boardroom by making sure we don't have economic inclusion, long before they kill us in the streets with their knee on our neck. That is really where the war is being lost. The voting booth, the schoolroom, the courtroom, the boardroom. And your guidance in helping young people to understand your future and everything about your life is happening in real time in that voting booth and in those rooms. So that's, I think, anything you tell us, what's the CTA? What do people need to do to help make sure that we're getting our young kids involved and moving forward in the right direction to get this behind us?
I think the first thing would be, we've all heard the word relational organizing so much the past year. I know a lot of us don't even want to hear it anymore. But the truth is, the fight must continue, and we have to continue to relational organize. We have to continue to tell our friends, our neighbors, every post on Instagram, every tweet matters. And also the messenger matters, right? That's one thing that we talked a little bit about when we talk about how amazing the turnout was, especially amongst young people in the state of Georgia. When you have polished people who are from HBCUs that may not really resonate with other people of color, right? So we need people who have different voices, right? Speaking on this particular issue. And a lot of people don't believe social media works, but it does. And we've seen it work because we organized in the global pandemic and had the largest voter turnout rate that we've ever had in the history of this country since 1972. So it works. We also need to ensure that we're bringing young people to the table. I know Mrs. Helen and Latasha have a lot of young people working in their organization to work on these issues, to touch those voters. And so the work is happening, but we need more support and all the support that we can, because it can't just happen in Georgia. It has to happen all across the country.
Mm-hmm. Well, listen, you know, anybody who thinks social media doesn't work, we don't want to talk to them. Okay. We just don't have time to them. Okay. We just gotta put them on pause. So don't even bring them up, you know. Helen, you know, talk to us in terms of CTA. What can we do? What should we be doing? What do we need to do?
Well, I think you've heard it a lot. What happened in Georgia, numbers matter. We showed up in record numbers. We stood in line, no matter what the barriers may be in place. We had the tenacity and the understanding that public policy impacted us in every aspect. If we were looking at COVID and needed health care, if we needed unemployment benefits, right now we're talking about rental assistance, people being evacuated. Well, these elected officials in the judicial systems are making these decisions. So we've got to be involved in every aspect. We've got to have a plan of action for us to be involved. In other words, you've heard about the federal, as I said, being involved on a federal level, whether we're in the streets or whether we're in the suites. We've got to have a plan of action, but everybody can have this action by being involved in every election cycle. Have your plan for how you're going to be involved in that process. Know your rights, know the rules of the games. SB 202 in Georgia changed that rules of the game. Well, know what that rule is going to be. We talk about 95% of the voters are registered to vote. Well, that means 300,000, the other 5%, are not registered. And of course, the Secretary of State in Georgia just purged 200,000 people. So that means that there are 500,000 people right there that have to be involved. But it's not just registering to vote, it's knowing when and how to be vote, knowing who's on the ballot. Where do I go? How can I protect my right to vote? Become involved, be a part of our democracy squad where we monitor all of this process. Because right now, one of the popular things that is happening throughout the country, not in just Georgia, is taking over boards of election to have total control of the process, from registration to administration to the counting and to the certification of the election. So they're putting in place processes that will really take over every aspect of the process. So we've got to have federal legislation that will prevent that. But in the meantime, we can overcome it by being involved ourselves. We've got to hold our elected officials accountable. We can't just see them during the election cycle. They have to come back regularly and tell us, what have you done for me lately? And if you can't do that, then maybe I need to, as a voter, get me, as you said, and we use the same analogy, that there are employees. Well, you need to get a new employee. You got to train someone else to make sure it gets done. We've got to really become involved. You can't stand on the sideline. You can't just depend on us organizing. We can't out-organize all this stuff. Latasha does a great job across the country. I try to do my part, and Mary Pat is doing her part in Georgia. But we can't just depend on us. Each one of us have got to be involved on a day-to-day basis, and it can't just be during election cycle. It has to be 365 days a year. So get involved.
Absolutely. Yes, remember, they are temporary hired help and they work for you. You know, Queen Coretta Scott King, she once said, struggle is a never-ending process. Freedom is never really won. You earn it, and we win it in every generation. And we win it in every generation. That's why we have to have everybody from the babies to everybody to age 110, whatever it is, because it never stops. And it's so important. Latasha, please share with us some CTA and your observations and what we can do and how we can come together and achieve this goal.
You know, I want to ditto everything that my sisters, Mary Pat. I can't wait till I can cast my vote and write a check for you, sister, when you run again.
You're not going to lose by 22 votes next time.
You know what I mean? We're going to get you them 22 votes and more next time, right? But even that kind of leadership, and that, because I want to point to not just her running and her leadership around elected, but she has a vision. Right? Because what I want to really share around, and even what Helen raised, you know, we have to do this work now. I am the first, my organization is called Black Voters Matter, but we've got to have an authentic conversation with our community. Voting ain't enough. It will not be enough in a system that was literally created in a structure to literally marginalize who we are as a people, that every single day in this country, I know we are tired of, we have to literally fight for our very humanity. You know, I'm a native of Selma, Alabama, and many people would say, you know, the folks of Selma, they were fighting for the right to vote. No, they were fighting for literally, they were affirming their humanity, and that the right to vote was one expression of that, being able to use their agency to impact those things around us. And so I want people to think beyond that. In the moment, we have to be engaged in what we have now, right? But I also want to say that what we have to do is radically reimagine what are the possibilities that can exist that will literally get us to facilitate a real democracy. Because the democracy as it is laid out in the Constitution, we're going to have to be honest, it has not been achieved. And that voting in itself, while it has a tremendous amount of power, we have to also be authentic and honest about a limitation around that. And so what does that mean? I'll just ask this question. Everybody that's looking right now, I want people to close their eyes and just listen to this question real quick. My question to you is, what would this nation look like without racism? What would the systems look like? I'm raising that as a real critical point because that's the work, y'all. That's the work. If we don't really take time to envision what this world or what this nation looks like without racism, we will never create that. We will continue to be in this continuous wheel, this rat race wheel, that this system that was created and designed to push us out, that we've got to literally seek for justice in that. Yes, we've got to engage because those policies are impacting our community now, but we also have to be visionaries and see ourselves as founders of a new America. What will this new America look like? What would the economic system look like? How can we literally create? Let's think about it, y'all. 15 years ago, we didn't know about a Twitter, right? 25 years ago, we didn't really know about everybody's going to have a computer and have an iPhone. It took someone actually envisioning, imagining, using their radical reimagination that literally created something that changed the entire way that we communicate. And so I am just saying that while we are building and doing the work now, the way that I think we're going to sustain our community and engage is that we see ourselves as using our imagination to create the kind of world, that kind of beloved community that we seek. That Dr. King, that the work that he was doing was in the moment, but he also had a dream because he was using his imagination of what were the possibilities of us going. And so I think that that's part of the work. What I want people to do is I want people to dream. I want people to think about how do we create the world that we all deserve? How do we shift every single system in this country so that it is that it literally will facilitate the kind of democracy that we deserve and that we're willing to fight for, because we who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes.
You know, simply brilliant. And, you know, you touched on something that is so important, because that is the foundation of what's happening here, the racism. The racism is, you know, to stop you from voting. And if we stop you from voting, then you don't have rights. And if you don't have rights, then we can treat you like a stray dog out on the streets.
That's right.
Because, and Gandhi said it best, you know, poverty is the worst form of abuse. And this is all designed to make sure you stay illiterate, to stay down, to stay out, to stay broke, to stay on a modern day plantation. That's what voting rights is all about. And, you know, and as Cheryl and Eiffel said, getting to the table when you vote on everything, not every 4 years, but every week. That's 110% correct. And when you talk about racism, we have not dealt with that in this country.
We have not dealt with that.
We have not, and people don't really understand how ugly and deep it is. And I want to share something I think is very important that we know, that everybody knows. In 1916, there was a book that was written, and that book was The Passage of the Great Race, written by a young man named Madison Grant, a young white guy who was well-to-do. I think he went to Columbia Law School. He was walking around New York, 1914, 1915. He was upset about all of the immigration into America and the Jews coming into America out of Europe. And he writes this book, The Passage of the Great Race, Keep America White and Pure. That's the book. The book takes off. The book is like, it's people go bananas over this book, and they change immigration laws over this book, and they stop, you know, the Jews from coming into Europe because of this book, right? There was a young man, and this is very important, don't ever forget it. There was a young man who read this book, The Passage of the Great Race, Keep America White and Pure. And this young man said, this is the greatest book I have ever read. This book is my Bible. And that young man was Adolf Hitler.
That's right.
Okay, get your mind around that our racism is so deep. We created it and exported it all the way to Europe, and it came back as the Holocaust. Now, this is something that everybody must remember. Adolf Hitler gave an interview to the New York Times, and he said, I really don't understand why America's coming down on me so hard. Everything I learned about immigration control, I learned from America.
Absolutely.
It says, as a matter of fact, I thought America would become my partner. Now get your mind around that. Adolf Hitler tells the New York Times, I thought America would be my partner. Now remember this, Adolf Hitler sent his Nazi lawyers to New York, to America. And he said, study the Jim Crow law that they're using on the Negroes, and go back and use them on the Jews. Okay, that's how ugly the racism is in America. And we have to understand that, and we have to eradicate that, and we have to shut it down. It is something, and all of this voter suppression, that's what this is about. I can't let you have rights, because the bottom line is, I brought you here to America to make me wealthy.
That's right.
Not to participate in the wealth.
That's right.
I brought you here to be a slave to make me the wealthiest country in the world.
That's right.
You got it twisted if you thought I want to share some of this economic pie with you.
That's right. That's right.
Which is
So
why Queen King said to me, that's why they killed Martin Luther King. He was speaking on economic inclusion, and a part of that is having political power. I'm sorry, Latasha.
I just want to say quickly, I love what you said, and just quickly, because I know we don't have time, but right before there is the birthing, there is labor pains. And so what we're experiencing right now are labor pains. All of that has happened to us, but here yet we stand. And so the bottom line is, in our brilliance, in our power, we have still been able to break through that racism. So imagine when we really tap into our creativity and our humanity, that not only do our community needs us, but we are going to transform and open up space for the world, for the entire world. This I am convinced of.
You are 1,000% correct. This is the vision of the great Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We must achieve one America. And if we achieve one America, we can achieve a slice of heaven right here on planet Earth.
That's right.
And that's what we're striving for. That's right. And we will be the example for the rest of the world to achieve one planet. And when you do that, you absolutely have heaven right here on Earth. When we all are one. So this is, and you got to stop this divide and conquer. So is there anything that, you want to share with us, Helen or Mary Pat or Latasha, that we need to make sure we cover on the CTA, because we're not here to just talk about it. We're here to fix it.
One comment, and that is, I think about Amelia Boynton often, whose name goes unheard when we think about the fight for justice currently in this country. And I remember meeting her on the March to Selma to Montgomery. I believe it was the 45th commemoration. And she said to me, so many people say they're standing on my shoulders, but stand on your own. My shoulders are tired. And as Miss Helen Butler would say, this is our Selma moment. We can't continue to stand on the shoulders of Amelia Boynton and John Lewis. They have paved a way for us, and we must continue to do this fight on our own. Their shoulders are tired, and they've done what they needed to do. And now it's our time to do what we need to do. Miss Helen?
Well, I just want to say, in the vein of what Latasha was talking about, we've got to know where our money supports our suppression. We've got to stop that. Selma was about economics. So where is our economics? Where does our dollar return to us that we're earning? But more than that, I do want to say Black women lead the way. As a member of the Black Women's Roundtable, I got to give us a plug. We were out there doing that direct action, but you can do whatever you think would be good for you, but join us in this struggle and make sure that we know where our money is going. Run for office. We need people like Mary Pat, like Latasha, like all of you young people out there. We need you to be those elected officials making the public policy.
And I'll just quickly say, to my sister's point, at the end of the day, part of the attack that we're seeing, y'all, is not because we're losing. It's because we are winning. That we're literally transforming the very fabric of this country. And we will continue to do that. When we use our power, we change the color of the landscape. I heard a sister say this in Tennessee. So keep doing the work, because I believe we will win.
Yes. We are winning. That's the reason you're seeing unbelievable pushback. Yes. That's why you're seeing all this legislation, 200-300 pieces of legislation. Who knows? It's probably even more, to voter suppression, to shut us down. We are winning. Do not forget that. We are winning. This is our moment. You've got to lean in and you have got to protect yourself because these rights are being taken away because we are winning. Ladies, thank you. I appreciate you so much. I don't know if we have another a segment, another tape to roll, but if we do, please roll it. If not, I'm going to go to our third and final segment. Okay, so I have the green light for that. Great. All righty, please. Let's bring on Macy Hall. She's a political activist with who's demonstrated a history of working in political organizations, and she has worked for nonprofit organizations, lobbying firms, local elections, and focused on fundraising and community organizing. She's currently the Georgia State Director for March On. Macy's been instrumental in leading the on-the-ground efforts in Georgia, voter canvassing and other key efforts, and disrupting non-voter stereotypes and shifting the political paradigm in the Georgia elections. Welcome, Macy. Nice to meet you.
Wow. I mean, what an introduction. Thank you so much.
Well, listen, you deserve it. It's your life. You lived it. And listen, you do all the hard work. It's good people like you who do the very important hard work that unfortunately isn't amplified. And also there are a lot of people out there who want to learn from you and also help you and support you and be right by your side. So if you would share with us some of the wonderful things you've been doing and more importantly, how we can help.
Absolutely. Of course, with that amazing introduction, just to give a little background about myself, I am a graduate of Spelman College. I actually came out as a theater major, and I directly went into politics. And I went to one conference, and I fell in love, and I never left again. But I've been involved in a lot of different organizations, a lot of different political campaigns and things like that. I've done about 13 different campaigns, from DAs to commissioners to mayoral elections all across the state. And I've now kind of shifted myself and being a little bit more focused in the community engagement and focusing in with our voters. I think we're at a time right now where our voters need support and they need people behind them and they need voices to stand next to them. And that's what I love doing. So working with March On, I started on with them in this past presidential election, and we hopped on a bus traveling from Houston, Texas, all the way over to Atlanta, Georgia. And we were helping our voters to get excited even during a pandemic. We wanted to make sure that people got out, that they had their voices heard. And we brought food, we brought giveaways, we brought music, but we wanted to also break the stigma of, gosh, I just don't want to stand in this line. And so we wanted to bring some excitement to the polls. So had a really, really great time doing that during the presidential elections. And then, of course, all eyes came on Georgia. So we hopped back on a bus and we started traveling again around the state of Georgia. And we wanted to make sure that our voters were still energized and they were still ready to go and make sure that their voices were heard. I'm actually wearing a sweatshirt with Fannie Lou Hammer on it. And so I always like to say, when you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, then get energized and get ready and jump in the game. So that's what we did. And we wanted to excite our voters to do the same.
All right. March On. I love it. March On. What is the unique position on March On as far as voting rights and the voting rights suppression that we continue to deal with?
Absolutely. March On is an organization that actually started out in 2017 with the Women's March on Washington. And from there, we've started working and really focusing in on different issues that kind of surround Black and Brown communities. Various things, but that big focus for us was, of course, that voter protection. So we decided to create our voter protection corps, where we offer opportunities for individuals to be protected, to be educated, and to be supported as they make their way to the polling locations and making sure that their ballots get casted. Like I said, within this past election, it was such a crazy year, and there was so much at stake, and there was so much work to be done. And so we heard the call and we said, even through a pandemic, we're going to be out here and we're going to make sure that our people are protected. Having that visibility and having that space to be able to ensure that you don't see the what would you call the intimidation that comes when you go to the polling locations. In areas like Dalton, a lot of our brown voters are afraid to cast their ballots because they're afraid of deportation. A lot of our Black and brown our Black communities here in Georgia feel like their votes don't matter. And as we saw in this past election and in the runoff, every single vote counted, and it took every single vote to flip this state. And so we hope that people stay encouraged. I mean, we've heard so many great things from these different panelists that you guys had tonight, but a lot of them said the same thing. Elections are something that is not once every 4 years. It doesn't happen just during a presidential. This happens every year. And as we look just into 2021, there are 3,000 local elections happening here within the state of Georgia. And so there's probably something happening near you, and we want to make sure that you're ready for that. Additionally, SB 202 has completely changed the game of how voting is going to happen. And so there's a lot of education behind that to understand how can you be prepared and how can you ensure that your ballot does get counted. And of course, we don't have to worry about this fraud that we've seen in the past, this cheating that we've seen in the past, but we can make sure that every single voice gets counted.
If there's something to be voted on, Black people, we must vote. I don't care what it is. Just vote. Just show up. You're a vote here, I'm voting. Just vote. That's the bottom line now. If you Black, you're voting. And you're donating. Can't just vote. Gotta donate. Gotta get involved and really and volunteer. So talk to us. Are you doing a march on Washington?
Oh, I see. You've heard what we've been working on.
Oh, okay. See, that's social media. That's Twitter. That's Instagram. I couldn't believe when she said some people don't believe in social media. I'm like, what are you talking about?
Yes. So March On has partnered up with Future Coalition, who is our younger group who focuses with 18 to 25-year-olds. We've also partnered with SEIU, with NAN, and with the Drum Major Institute to ensure that we came together and brought organizations together across the country to have a day of action. And so that day, it started off with 5 flagships, and it has now turned into, we had to drop one of our flagships due to COVID reasonings out in Texas. So that was unfortunate, but we still have our 4 main flagships in Arizona, Miami, DC, and here in Atlanta, Georgia. And we also have 85 sister marches that are being represented in 38 different states. We have packed the week with virtual events, and we have been revving up for this day. And so now we're on the eve of the March On for Voting Rights, which is also the eve of the 50th anniversary of Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech. And so we have been working with the March On Washington to bring a little piece of that with a little bit of Atlanta spice on the end of it too. But to be able to not only celebrate the victory that we had this year, but we are also going to bring that awareness of what's happening this upcoming year and moving into 2022. Here in Georgia, we have a fight, and we have a fight that's going to last us at least until 2024. And so we want to make sure that our voters are energized, that they are excited, that they are ready, and they're also being surrounded by organizations who stand next to them all the way to the ballot box. So when you have questions, when you're wondering who you can turn to, these organizations have stood up. We have now gotten over 213 partners across the nation to join up with us. And so this is something that is not a Georgia issue. It's not a DC issue. It's a national issue. And we want to ensure that people are ready, and they are ready to cast those ballots this year. It's going to be a great, great time.
What do you say to those folks who say, hey, why are we marching? It's ineffective, or they criticize and think that it's ineffective? Please share with them why marching is so important.
Yes, absolutely. And we heard it a little bit earlier, with SB 202 and other bills like that are finding ways to make it very hard for Black and brown communities to be able to cast their ballots. There has to be something that kind of not only, again, allows us to come together, but it also allows us an opportunity to stand and say, no matter what you do, we're going to keep coming. And so this is an opportunity, like I said, for us to be able to come together and find those allies who are going to be able to help us and assist us. So even if it's even beyond just the march itself, that opportunity to come together as a community says something. Because when we go to those ballot boxes, we're not going alone. We're going with those individuals who came before us. We're going with those individuals who stand with us. And we're going to represent those people who come in the future. And so, you know, this is a time for, as I see, a time to celebrate. This march is a way for us to kind of honor those people who came before us, who started this fight within voting rights. And so we want to ensure that we are honoring them. And then we are also saying that we're going to march our way all the way up to that ballot box when it comes time.
I love it. I think the marches are very important. Strength in numbers. It shows unity. It shows strength. It shows commitment. I think it's phenomenal. And I really appreciate you and all that you do. I really mean that. And
thank you.
You know, you are a hero. So know that. So listen, how do we sign up? How do people sign up? How do we get involved?
Absolutely. So to sign up, you want to go to marchonforvotingrights.org/Atlanta. And that will take you directly to our Atlanta page so that you can sign up here in Georgia. If you are not here in Georgia, then you can also sign up on marchonforvotingrights.org, where you can see virtual events that will be happening. And you can also see other sister events and flagships that are happening across the country that may be close to you. Additionally, we want you to come out there and celebrate with us. We have quite a large show. We have some big heavy hitters coming out to speak. Of that, as you guys heard earlier, Congresswoman Naacp Williams will be joining us, and Dr. Bernice King will be joining us as well. So we have some big giants who are standing next to us and want to stand with you. We will be at the King Center starting at 9 a.m. So get on up and come on down. And we will start moving our march down Auburn at 10 a.m. We have, due to COVID, we have been required to shorten our march a bit, but the march will go on. But we will move our march at 10 a.m. and we'll be moving back to the King Center to have some more speakers as well as some musical performances to give you a little bit of Atlanta flavor.
All right. Absolutely terrific. Macy Hall, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you. Really appreciate it. Listen, I want to thank all the wonderful people who joined us. First of all, Dr. King, thank you for organizing this. Your mama and daddy are very proud of you and definitely up in heaven smiling down on you because you have carried the torch and continue to build and protect the legacy. And you need to know you are much appreciated. And I will always carry you in my heart. So thank you, Dr. King. Truly brilliant. Congresswoman, Miss Williams, Congresswoman Williams, thank you for hanging out with us. Michael Lee, fantastic. Queen Cheryl and Eiffel, it's unbelievable. Helen, love your words, Helen Butler. We're going to keep an eye on you and thank you for all the great work you're doing there in Georgia. Mary Pat, unbelievable. We absolutely need young people throughout this nation to understand your passion and commitment and how they can lean in, because these young people will definitely get us into the end zone. And Latasha Brown, thank you so much. All of you. Macy, listen, I want to thank our sponsors as well. Gilead and Tower Brook, really appreciate you. Thank you for helping to provide that support so we can be here. And, this is something that you must really remember. This is a unique moment in history, and you are the heroes. There's no one that's going to save you. It's you. Dr. King, he said it, he said, such a thing as being too late. This is no time for apathy or complacency. This is a time for vigorous and positive action. And everybody, all of you, you are superheroes. What you do makes a difference. Do not forget that. Do not think that you don't matter, you don't count. What you're doing is insignificant. It's the complete opposite. People work very hard to make you think that, make you feel that way. But that isn't the case. You're an absolute gift. You're a gift to humanity. You're a gift to this country. You bring enormous resources. You're needed. And you have the ability to show the world just how magnificent you are. And I hope you choose that, to show the world who you are. You know, I bought the Griot. At one point, the Griot was owned by NBC Universal. And I bought it because I watched the elections of 2016. And we, as Black people, we didn't lean in. And we lost some really terrific talent. And I've watched elections throughout. And the main reason I bought it was to have a place. And the Griot is African for storyteller. And this is our village. And I wanted our stories to be heard, told, amplified. And I wanted us to have a place to get the information we need. You can always go and know that at the Griot, we're going to help provide this information, what we should be thinking about in terms of politics and politicians, and what our ask is. Because I think that's been a big issue in our community. We haven't been clear about our ask. And now we're going to be very loud and proud from here on out about our ask. It isn't about what we can do for you, politician. It's not about you. It's about us. You are here to make our lives better. And we are going to be better at holding you accountable. We're going to make sure we achieve these 4 E's. We're going to make sure that our children are educated properly. We're going to make sure that we have equal justice. We're going to make sure that we have environmental protection. We're going to make sure we have economic inclusion. And we are going to achieve Coretta Scott King's and Martin Luther King's vision of one America. Because when we get what we deserve, one America, we will actually get a slice of heaven right here on earth. And you know what? You deserve it. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate you. And whatever you do, don't forget, you're a king, you're a queen, you have enormous power. Don't relinquish it, use it, and show the world how brilliant and beautiful you are. Thank you for hanging with us.